We're going to be talking about carbohydrates because I find it can be a confusing talk for a lot of people. People think I shouldn't be eating carbs. Carbs are going to help me lose weight. Carbs are bad. These are all the things that I hear. One thing I always let people know, well, vegetables are carbs, fruit are carbs. So we all eat carbs. When people say they're on a no carb or a low carb diet, they're actually usually referring to that they're not eating breads and pastas and cakes and kind of all those things that we tend to find quite yummy, I guess, right? I'm just opening chat, making sure nobody's typing in that they can't hear me. I think I've resolved those issues. So when we talk about carbs, remember they're found in fruit, vegetables, legumes, and you're all consuming legumes. Dairy is a carb, nuts and seeds. We really only have three what we call macronutrients, which is fat, protein, and carbohydrates. So some things overlap, obviously, but carbohydrates is a huge category. When we talk about macronutrients, dairy isn't a macronutrient, right? Just protein, carbs, and fats are our macronutrients. So we can't really go no carb. There are different types of carbs though, and there are types that are great for our body and give us energy and give us lots of nutrients. And there are carbs that give us nothing at all. So these would be things like your simple carbs, your white bread, your white rice. Oh, I'm hearing somebody just, let me just hear who just maybe came on and has their mic on. Well, everybody's muted. Okay, so these would be things, your white bread, your white rice, your pasta, your cookies, your cakes. These are the simple carbs, and they tend to be very quickly absorbed, cause that sugar spike, that insulin spike that we are talking about so much, and then that complete insulin drop. And then because our body wants some energy, it sends out a craving for simple carbs. Something has just happened here on my screen. So it sends out a craving for simple carbs again, and that's where people get the carb and the sugar cravings. Things like complex carbs are brown rice, whole grain bread, nuts and seeds. These are a complex carb. They're absorbed much more slowly. They tend to be very high in nutrients, and they give us longer lasting energy. Our fibrous carbs are our vegetables and our fruit. So these are the different types of carbs that we want to be consuming, the number 2 and the number 3. The simple carbs we could do without. And usually when people cut the simple carbs out of their diet, they tend to lose weight quite quickly. When we talk about carbs, we're going to need to talk about the glycemic index, and this may be something that you have heard in the past, people following a low GI glycemic index diet. Anybody who is borderline diabetic has probably heard about this. So what the glycemic index is it's measuring how fast a specific carbohydrate, and let's just use watermelon, will convert into sugar, which is glucose or insulin, in your blood. And this is significant because, as I mentioned, if we have that blood sugar rise too fast, it tells our brain to put out more insulin. And then over time, if we keep having this blood sugar due to something we ate rise, in output of insulin, our body can no longer kind of keep up with it, and we become what's called insulin resistant. So we lose insulin insensitive, and so we don't want that to happen. So this is how insulin works. Insulin brings the blood sugar out of our bloodstream. So we eat something, let's say cake. We eat cake, and we have those simple carbs. Simple carbs are very quickly converted into sugar. Flour basically becomes sugar in our body. So now our body puts out insulin to try to take those sugar molecules, figure them floating throughout your bloodstream, to take it out of the blood because it wants to bring it down, right? Our body likes homeostasis, and it takes that sugar and it stores it over there as fat, right? It stores it into your fat cells. So a faster increase in blood sugar leads to a greater release of insulin and therefore more storage of fat. Before, we now get a drastic lowering of blood sugar, right? Because it's pulled it all out. And this is that energy rush. Say we eat a chocolate bar or that cake we're talking about, and then we feel like this guy over here, especially that often to say if you work at an office, that 3 o'clock afternoon energy slump, right? And people reach for coffee and sugar, right? Caffeine and sugar to look to pick up their energy, and then they're left like this guy. I understand that. I feel that way some days too. So glycemic index, how it's determined is they took a whole bunch of different foods, and they gave subjects 50 grams of carbohydrates. They measured their blood sugar before they had that 50 grams of that carbohydrate, and then a few hours after. The problem with this is 50 grams of carbohydrates, if we were to look at I think watermelon, it has kind of a bad rap because it has a high GI. But 50 grams of carbohydrates in watermelon is something ridiculous, like 9 cups of watermelon. Well, most of us aren't eating 9 cups of watermelon. We're not always eating 50 grams of carbohydrates. So there is a limit to glycemic index. And this is where we're going to soon talk about what I prefer, glycemic load. So if you were to look at foods that have low GI, it would be something that's 55 or less. And most fruits and vegetables fall under here, except for the root vegetables. Like carrots, sweet potatoes. They're category 2 vegetables in your program. Our whole grains like oats and buckwheat and barley, all bran cereal. I think one of you was just telling me that all bran buds are your new favorite breakfast accompaniment, right? And all bran buds are a great, very high fiber cereal. Medium GI are things that are getting a little more flaky, a little more white, I guess you could call it. The whiter it gets, the higher the GI typically. But as I said, glycemic index doesn't help us because we're not always eating 50 grams of carbohydrates. If we look at carrots here, 50 grams of carbohydrates from carrots would be 50 baby carrots. Again, nobody eats that, right? Eats 50 grams of carbs or 50 baby carrots at once. So this is where glycemic load tends to be better. Glycemic load applies to food as people actually eat it, which isn't always 50 grams of carbohydrates. So we can calculate glycemic load, but don't worry too much about the science, but just so you know how it is calculated. They take that GI, so that GI is still important because we need to know it, and they times it by the number of number of grams of carbohydrates. So let's use a can of Coke. It has a 97 GI rank. And do you remember I said 70 and above is considered very, very high? 97 is a can of Coke. And it has 42 grams of carbs in it. So that would be a 40 gram glycemic load. When we look at glycemic load, 20 and above is considered high GL. So Coke is double that, right? So hopefully that's something that is not in anybody's diet because it's not in your food plans. And we've talked before about aspartame. So diet pop still has a spike. Aspartame still causes a spike of insulin in us. So that's why drinking diet pop isn't really much better than drinking regular pop. We've just got to get completely away from pop altogether, diet and regular, and great substitutes are sparkling water, sparkling flavored water. Perrier has some really nice flavored ones, grapefruit, lime, and Perrier used to have a higher sodium content. It's now 0 when you look at the label. So flavored Perrier are great. Taking sparkling water and diluting it with a third an amount of juice. There are some really nice greens powders out there right now. They used to be terrible, greens powders, and greens powders are I've gone off on a tangent here talking about other drink options, but I think it's important because people often say, I don't want to just drink water. Greens powders are kind of, think of it as powdered vegetables, and they have some nice flavored ones now. There's what else to drink? I like to drink chlorophyll once in a while. Chlorophyll is a very alkaline drink, and they have some nice mint flavored chlorophyll drinks. Magnesium, they have a lot of powders that are, again, nicely flavored. So we have lots of options of flavored drinks that don't have the calories and the sugar in it as well. Remember, you can type into chat at any time as well. Right? So glycemic load, we want to aim for 10 or less. Do not worry about calculating it out. If you want to look at what foods are high GI, high GL versus low, here are some websites, and I gave you these slides so you would have these websites. But I can promise you that in your first-line therapy plan, everything that you're eating is low GL, low GI. Your higher GI vegetables, those root vegetables, you're limited, right, with 1 or 2. And your grains, your carbohydrate grains, your starchy carbs, you're limited as well to 1 or 2. So some people can tolerate more carbs than others. And you'll see these people, right? These are the people that are just kind of naturally lean and skinny. They're eating food all day long. They're eating the wrong types of food and they're still thin. They just have a really good carbohydrate metabolism. Not fair, I know, but you know, genetics plays some role into it. But if you remember in our exercise talk, we talked about how cardiovascular exercise can actually increase your carbohydrate tolerance, right? Because exercise, cardiovascular exercise, uses carbohydrates as your first source of energy. So the more cardiovascular exercise you do, the better your body gets used to processing these carbs and metabolizing these carbs. So here's an example of somebody who would be eating more carbs throughout the day and handling them well, but I want you to pay attention to what their carbs are and their portion sizes. So let's just say they have a half a cup of oats at breakfast and maybe they have some eggs for some protein. At lunch, they have a half a cup of brown rice or quinoa with their lunch or their dinner. Maybe at their lunch, they have a sprouted grain bread with a side salad. So this is actually all really good carbohydrates, but for some people, if they were to eat this amount of carbs, they would gain weight with it. Other people can tolerate this just fine. If you want to test your carbohydrate tolerance, because a lot of people will say, well, how do I know this? You can try testing it. If you are having success right now on your food plan and you're following it without really any feeling carb cravings or feeling hungry, I wouldn't test it right now, right? We're doing a 12-week program. We can try to stick with it. But what you can do when you want to test it is just add an extra piece of fruit. Remember, fruit is carbohydrates. It's a good carbohydrate. Add an extra piece of fruit to your plan and do this for, you know, a week or two and just see, are you still keeping the same weight or are you still losing weight? If you are, then that's great. That means you can tolerate a little bit more carbohydrates. If you're not, unfortunately, you're one of those people who cannot tolerate more carbohydrates as easily. So you'll want to take it back out or increase your exercise to try to increase your carb tolerance. If you had success with the fruit and you're saying, okay, I've now done this plan for 12 weeks, I want to start to get back to regular eating, next try adding a whole grain, another serving of whole grain, and see how that affects it. At the end of the 12 weeks, we're not going, woohoo, I did 12 weeks, time to go back to whatever I was eating before. The idea is that it's not a really difficult plan to follow, that you can maintain it, but maybe you want to start to add a little bit more and just kind of see how your body adjusts to it, keeping in mind that everybody adjusts to things a little bit differently. Because the idea is that you want to find a strategy that works for you. It doesn't just look good in your food journal, but that it's effective and it's sustainable. We're at 6 weeks now, halfway through. I've been getting good feedback from a lot of you that you're starting to feel more energetic. Some of the symptoms you had that were bothering you are starting to go away. I think a lot of you have already experienced some weight loss, which is great. And that's kind of what we're wanting to do. So carbohydrates, when you hear people say they're eating no carbs, they are eating carbs. We need carbs. It's our source of energy, but we need the right carbs. So remember, we want fruits and vegetables as our carbohydrate for our and those are our fibery carbohydrates. For our starchy carbohydrates, our slow absorbing carbohydrates are our full grains. So freekeh, quinoa, bulgur, brown rice, gosh, there's so many. Our legumes are that. And starting to play around with different carbohydrates, different grains. I love Bulk Barn for the fact that you can go and just, if you haven't tried having bulgur in the morning for oatmeal instead of oatmeal, give it a try. And you can take just a little bit and you're not committed to liking it. And thinking of breakfast, I think some of you have probably already signed up, but if not, either send me an email and I will sign you up, or you will have already gotten the email with the sign up that I'm doing a 7-day healthy breakfast challenge, because I find this is a meal that a lot of people struggle with. or they find something that works and they stick with the same breakfast all the time. So if you haven't yet signed up for my 7-day healthy breakfast challenge, sign up for it. Next week, we're going to be talking about supplements. Today was a bit of a faster talk, but next week this will be a little bit of a longer one. I find this runs for about a half an hour, the supplement talk, because people often have a lot of questions. You have all been kind of, when we did our individual talk, been suggested supplements specific to you, but I'm going to be talking about the top, I wrote in here the top 3 everybody should be taking, but I'm going to talk about the top 5 actually that I think most of us should be taking. I'm just going to open the chat. I didn't see anything come through. Everybody's kind of quiet tonight, it seems. There are no questions in chat. I thought on carbs there'd be lots of questions for carbs. Because there's quite a few of you here. There's 9 of you tonight. I love it. Everybody made it out tonight almost. Fantastic. So nobody has questions? Okay, I'm always going to assume that means I did a good job answering. And remember, as always, you can email me, text me, call me if you have any questions that are more private. But if you have them now, often people are thinking of it. We're halfway. So if you are not reaching the goals that you have been wanting to reach, please reach out to me. This is the time. It probably means we need to make an adjustment in your food plan, and I would like us to do that now rather than down the road. So reach out to me. Let me know how it's going. Yes, yeah, Althea just wrote it's a complicated subject, and it is. So I was trying to explain a little bit of the science behind it, but don't stress over it. What you are eating now is complex carbs. That's what we want, the whole grain carbs and the fruits and vegetables. So that's really what it comes down to. If you're following your plan, you're eating low GI, low GL, unless you have diabetes, you don't actually need to worry too much about following it very specifically. So, okay, wonderful. So we had a fast meeting tonight. As I said, tomorrow will be a little bit longer. Yes, that is why bananas aren't on the fruit list. You know, I'm going to also say bananas are not bad. Bananas have a higher GI for sure, but they still contain a lot of nutrients. So they're still a good option. They're a portable snack, and I'd rather somebody eat a banana than they're out and they don't have a snack and they have to pick up a muffin, because that's high GI. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, have a wonderful night, everybody. Let me know if you have any questions about carbs. Reach out to me to let me know at the halfway. I'd actually like to hear from everybody this week by email or phone, letting me know how it's going, if you're struggling at all with the food plan, because maybe we just need to make a few changes, or any other questions at all. But I want to know at this halfway point before we get too far down if you're not reaching your goals. Great. Have a wonderful night, and let me know about the 7-day breakfast challenge as well. If you haven't signed up, I want you all signed up for it. Enjoy. Bye-bye.